I thank my colleague from South Dakota and also my colleague from Alabama, the ranking member of the Budget Committee. And I was deeply troubled this morning because I asked Mr. Zients about the president's budget and my concern that under the trajectory of the president's budget that we would be reaching $26 trillion of debt in the next 10 years under his budget. And I was shocked when he described the president's budgetship as a milestone, leadership. This, to me, is not leadership. And if it's a milestone for anything, this budget is a milestone for bankruptcy and what we see happening in Europe and other areas of the world that we don't want to happen to our country. And when, I think about it, I'm the mother of 2 children. How could we possibly ask our children to pay back $26 trillion in debt? It's outrageous, and I was really surprised that Mr. Zients couldn't answer basic questions like how much debt has been added under this president. As the senator from South Dakota mentioned, it's close to $5 trillion in debt. And also our entitlement programs. I mean, I know my grandparents are relying on Medicare, Social Security, and I asked Mr. Zients, the Medicare trustees have said that Medicare is going bankrupt in 2024. We know that Medicare is a huge driver of our programs. Then the people who are relying on them are going to be put in a horrible position very soon. 2024 is coming very quickly. And I asked Mr. Zients the question, what is the president's plan to preserve Medicare? And really, a completely insufficient answer. That's because in this budget, there is no plan to preserve Medicare for my grandparents and for everyone who's relying on Medicare right now. When I reviewed the president's budget, what it reminded me of is a discussion I've had with my kids recently, because my kids in the last couple of weeks have been talking about Punxsutawney Phil, the groundhog who comes out to see and look at his shadow to see whether we're going to have more winter, right? Well, Punxsutawney Phil has already come out of his hole, but in Washington, it's Groundhog Day all over again when it comes to the president's budget, because every year that this president has been in office, his proposed budgets have left us with trillion-dollar deficits, increased gross debt as a percentage of the share of our economy, continued massive spending, racking up enormous debt to where we will reach $26 trillion in 10 years, no plan to reform Social Security and Medicare to preserve these programs, and they are the mandatory spending, as Senator Thune mentioned, the largest driver of our debt, and massive tax increases. It's staggering when you think about a budget that offers close to the largest, if not the largest, tax increase in the history of our country, yet still runs a $1.3 trillion deficit this year and at least a $900 billion deficit in 2013. So it's the worst of all worlds. We're going to increase taxes on small businesses in this country that we're asking to generate revenue and create jobs, and yet we're still going to run trillion-dollar deficits. This is a very irresponsible budget, and we cannot afford a campaign document. We need a budget for this country, because when I think about where we are, when I think about what is happening in other countries around the world, in Europe, and the future of our country, and not only all of us here today, but what we will be passing on to my children and your children, because they can't repay $26 trillion in debt. How that's going to happen, and how fair is that? They didn't incur this debt. We did. We have a responsibility to address this now, and I've been deeply disappointed by this president and his failure of leadership on this issue. Think about it. My colleague, Senator Gregg, served on the president's fiscal commission. The president convenes a fiscal commission and ignores his own fiscal commission. In fact, since that time, we've incurred $1.5 trillion of debt since the fiscal commission issued a report. Last year, the president's budget came up for a vote in this body. It was so fiscally irresponsible that not one member of this chamber from either party or the independent voted for the budget. And that really says it all. And yet again, we have a similar budget being proposed by this president. That's why I say, unfortunately, it's Groundhog Day in Washington all over again. And it's unfortunate because the American people have seen this over and over again, and they're very, very tired because they understand at home they have to balance their budgets. They understand that at home they're making the difficult calls that need to be made to prioritize. And yet here in Washington, with this president's budget and the trajectory that our country is on because of the failure of leadership, we are in a position where we're hurting our country, where I'm very, very concerned about what we are passing on to the next generation. And I hope that my colleagues on the Senate Budget Committee will actually do the work that needs to be done and put together a responsible budget for this country, because it's been over 1,000 days since the Democrat-controlled Senate Budget Committee has actually done the work that needs to be done for this country. Because if the president's not going to do it, then I hope that in this body, in the United States Senate, that we will put together a responsible budget that gets our fiscal house in order for the future of our country. And I hope that this acting budget director, Mr. Zients, the next time he comes before the Senate Budget Committee, will just answer the questions that he's asked. I mean, this is simple math. When Senator Sessions asks him whether we're spending more money or not, you would hope you'd get a straight answer. And that's the least that the American people deserve. And I'm hoping that's what they will receive going forward. I would like to ask my colleague, Senator Sessions, the ranking member of the Budget Committee, what his impression of the president's budget is in terms of where it leads our country going forward and what he hopes that the Senate Budget Committee will do to address this fiscal crisis.